From the most trusted names in local news, KDPG Sunday Edition.
Good morning and welcome to the KDPG Sunday Edition. I'm Ken Rice. Last week marked 6 months since the massacre at the Tree of Life Synagogue, and 6 months to that day, another synagogue shooting, this one near San Diego, leaving one person dead and several others wounded, including the rabbi. The phrase "never again" was used to pay tribute to 6 million Jews and other victims of the Nazi Holocaust in World War II. Today, it serves as a reminder that anti-Semitism continues to plague the world, and houses of worship of other denominations, churches and mosques have also come under attack. How do survivors of these horrific crimes come to grips with what happened to them? Last January, some Tree of Life shooting survivors and victims' family members visited Charleston, South Carolina, where an African-American church is still recovering from a hate-inspired attack in 2015 that killed 9 of their own congregation. Lynn Hayes Freeland and photographer Rob Hobson traveled with them in their journey of healing.
Charleston, South Carolina is considered by some to be one of the most beautiful, peaceful cities in the United States. There's a lot of history here that goes back to the early 1800s, but there's recent history here too. Ugly history that connects Pittsburgh and Charleston together forever. These Pittsburghers, members of the New Light congregation in Squirrel Hill, are on a journey. 3 members of their congregation were killed in the hate-driven Tree of Life shooting last October. They've traveled to Charleston, South Carolina to spend time with members of the Emmanuel AME Church, who lost 9 members of their own congregation in a hate-driven shooting in June of 2015.
I would like to also learn a little more about the healing that has taken place from 2015, which is when the tragedy occurred here, up until now.
Dr. Peg Durachko was the driving force behind the Pittsburgh-Charleston meetup. Her husband, Dr. Richard Gottfried, was killed in the October shooting. The highlight for some on this trip, like Carol Black, Gottfried's sister, is the Sunday morning worship service at the very church where 9 people died.
Get a chance to blend those 2 congregations and you know, we actually see where it happened. It's still kind of raw for us.
Reverend Eric Manning was not the pastor here when the shooting took place, but he has been a big part of the healing process. Emmanuel welcomed the visitors from Pittsburgh, but also recognized their own healing is still a work in progress.
It brought back, from Mother Emmanuel's perspective, what we went through just about 4 years ago, and our road to recovery is still taking place. And you see yet another congregation who's just starting out. Our hearts go out to them because we know the road is long.
The contingent from Pittsburgh was welcomed at the beginning of the service.
Those from the New Light congregation in Pittsburgh, give them a hand.
The message on this Sunday dealt with forgiveness and trusting God. But it was this moment that touched these 2 congregations in a way that no one anticipated. The members of New Light congregation were invited to come to the front of the church and line the altar. Then the members of Emmanuel AME congregation were invited to surround them there, both physically and in love.
I want you all to understand this congregation understands what you have gone through, what you're going through. You are not alone in this journey. We will be here. We will be there. All you need to do is just pick up the phone. Call us any hour of the night, any hour of the day.
As these 2 congregations, both victims of hatred, came together, they began to hug. They began to cry. And there was what seemed to be a release of pain and hurt that had been kept inside for a long time.
Being surrounded by all that love and support was so healing, so healing.
The outpouring of love was just totally amazing, and I feel like I accomplished what I came here to do, which is to hug the people in this church, and they were just awesome.
How's your heart feel?
Well, it's still broken, but I feel a camaraderie even closer with the people here now,
Yes.
and it was beautiful.
Lynn Hayes Freeland, KDKA News.
This morning on the KDPG Sunday edition, 6 months later, how the Tree of Life, Dor Hadash, and New Light congregations are continuing to cope. All three conducted worship services at the building at Wilkins and Shady in Squirrel Hill. Rabbi Jeffrey Myers is Tree of Life's spiritual leader. He's also a survivor of the shooting and helped others to safety. And Reverend Eric Manning, as you saw, senior pastor at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, also known as Mother Emmanuel. He's part of a special group of church members visiting Pittsburgh this weekend as a show of support. Joe Smido, editorial writer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joins us this morning. Joe, nice to have you along. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Reverend Manning, this is not your first visit to Pittsburgh. You were here within a week of the massacre at Tree of Life. Why?
Well, again, I think it's very important to show, as we said before in October, just a ministry of presence, wanting the rabbi and the Tree of Life synagogue members to know that they were not alone, that we would be here with them. So we made the proper arrangements to make sure that we could be here just for a few hours of the day, just to let Rabbi Myers know and the wonderful members of the new of all of the synagogue members, not just Tree of Life as well, but let them know that they were not alone.
And Rabbi, you've become a familiar face to us here in Pittsburgh and far beyond, but I wonder how you're doing. You wrote an essay for Time in which you said that sometimes you can't bring yourself to drive past the Tree of Life building. Obviously, healing takes a long time, but how are you doing?
I guess it depends upon the hour of the day. There are moments when one can feel down. There are moments of great uplift. So I don't think of it as any sort of like steady state sort of moment. It's kind of like an oscilloscope. And it depends upon the hour of the day.
And to have Reverend Manning and his delegation here after you saw what happened in Charleston, and I understand you have a visit planned to Charleston this summer. What does this bond mean, knowing that you have an opportunity to interact with people who've been through a similar tragedy?
We're able to provide comfort and love to each other because the people who understand it best are the people who've gone through it. And there's that special bond. There's that unique club that none of us want to belong to, but alas, we do belong to, that continues to sadly grow. And we're there for each other because we need to be.
And what do you have to say to the folks in San Diego who have now gone through what you have gone through?
We understand. We're there as well. We're with you, not just spiritually, but physically. And as the hours continue day after day, we're mindful of all of that and continue to work on the right ways to be able to offer any and all help that their community needs to cope with their horror.
The rabbi at Poway, Rabbi Goldstein, I saw an interview with him where he said the killer there is beyond redemption. This is a tough one. You struggle with this idea of forgiveness, do you not?
Sure.
How do people in Charleston feel? I read an interview with a woman who said she found it in herself. She never thought she would, but she found it in herself to forgive the killer from 2015.
Yeah, and forgiveness is a very personal journey for everyone. And it's one that you cannot necessarily force people to actually do or to embrace. And you have to be patient because everyone's going to come to forgiveness in their own timetable. And
so what if they don't?
You just continue to, that's actually a very good question. So if you take a step back and if a person chooses not to forgive, then you still do not condemn them. You still do not say, well, you should, well, you need to. Because again, it's a very personal journey. For example, Reverend Anthony Thompson, Myra Thompson's widow, one of the Emmanuel Nine, always says that for him, forgiveness was a way to release and take back his life, to not allow the shooter from Mother Emmanuel to come in and to take everything away. You know, he was going to release and then, of course, receive peace. And he talks about in not only just his book that's coming out, but in times of conversation, that after he did that, he felt a peace that he never felt before, after he forgave Dylan Roof during the bond hearing. And he said it was a peace of God that just came over him. But once again, for him, it was different. For other members of the families, there are still some who are struggling. There are still members within the congregation of Mother Emmanuel who are still struggling with the whole idea of forgiveness.
It's not that long ago. It's not even 4 years.
No.
Well, forgiveness is one issue, grace is another. And the people at both of your congregations have shown extraordinary grace and a desire to improve their entire communities. Has that been part of the healing process?
Rabbi?
Yes. We cannot take acts of evil and have those acts dictate who we are and what type of lives we choose to lead. Because if we let that happen, then the perpetrators win. And they not only have the initial victory of their dastardly deeds, but then a posthumous victory once again. So we choose to honor the memory of our 11 by rising above the evil and all of the hate speech, as I call it, and demonstrate acts of love, generosity, and kindness, because that's A, what our tradition demands of us, and B, without question, that's what these 11 beautiful people would have expected, and that's the type of people who they were.
All right, let's take a break, but you mentioned H speech, and I want to talk about that. And what are some of the reasons you feel we are seeing a resurgence of anti-Semitism, hate crimes, in numbers we haven't seen before, at least in recent memory? More of the KDPG Sunday Edition in just a moment.